Okay, I'm doing my TED Talk over the March 2015 Educational Leadership magazine. This whole issue is about culturally diverse classrooms, and cultural awareness and diversity has been a huge topic in education recently. And specifically, Louisville, one of our district initiatives that I'm responsible for is cultural proficiency. And so I was really interested in exploring this issue of this magazine to see different approaches to that topic and all the various things that encompasses. This issue covers, of course, ELL. I feel like that's probably when we think about cultural proficiency, that's one of the ones we always address as special ed in ELL. So there were articles in there on that. There was articles on literacy for all border children. There was an article about the story behind Ferguson, which is interesting. But I picked out two articles that really grabbed my attention. One that we didn't have so much information about that I wanted to learn more about, and that was the homeless and doubled up, which often in Louisville, I know at the school that I was at as principals, people would say, oh, well, we don't have homeless kids here, but we really did. And some of them actually lived at a camping site in a tent, which we just weren't aware of, or teachers weren't aware of, and some of them lived doubled up. So they live with their aunt and uncle and cousins and grandma and grandpa, and that's not their house. They're just living there doubled up. So that was an interesting article that I wanted to read about and get some perspective. And then the other one was the first one, which is inviting all students to learn. Because I feel like if you were to ask a teacher or share that with a teacher, they would agree that that's important, that all students are invited to learn, and they would probably say that they do that. But as we know, data shows that that doesn't happen for everybody. And so I wanted to see what they said about that. In that article, there were 4 steps that they suggest for teachers to help them become more aware of cultures in their classroom. But it went far deeper than just know your students and know that they play soccer. You know, teachers pride themselves on that I know my kids and I know which ones play sports, and I even go to their sports games. And so, but it goes a lot deeper than that. And when you're inviting them to learn. So we know relationships is big. At first, in one of the steps, it talked about recognizing and appreciating the cultural diversity, in that teachers are students of their students, which I love that. So they really wanted to understand what the world was like through the lens of a student. Oftentimes, I feel like us as educators, we assume, well, students need this, or they're going to like it this way, or this is what's best for them, when if we really look through the lens of a student and we studied them, we were students of them, learning about them, we'd be able to appreciate them more and see our world through their lens. It also talked about learning and looking for culturally influenced patterns. So is there a pattern in how different cultures in your classroom, how they want to respond to an answer, how much wait time they need? Those were some of the examples that they talked about. And then looking beyond the patterns for individuals. So we don't just say, oh, well, our Hispanic students need this and this and this, or our ELL students need this. But yes, there are common patterns and themes culturally, but there are also the individual, and how are they the same and different with their cultural group, so that we are really addressing their needs and not lumping them all together. And then the last one was to plan inviting curriculum and instruction. And I feel like teachers work on this all the time. That's what they pride themselves on. But again, if we were to go back and look through the lens of the student, is what we think they really enjoy or are interested in, is that really what they like or what they want to learn or how they want to learn? It talked in the article about really asking them, how do you learn best? What do you need in order to learn? And even for the older students, that's easier for them to answer, but for the younger students, it talked about sharing with them all the different ways that you could learn, and then really helping them identify the ways they respond best, which I thought was really interesting. The other article that I really wanted to focus on was the homeless and doubled up. This article caught my attention because so often we think or assume, or we use excuses that we can't help. You know, if someone's in their home situation, we can't help them with that. We can only help them when they're at school. So everything else is out of our control. So I wanted to see what the article said about that. It was very insightful. because I haven't had much experience with homeless and doubled up just based on the schools that I've been at. But they provided insight into perspectives and then how we can support them better. So it talked a lot about the home environment and uncertain rules, uncertain routines. Of course, the things that we often know about, the physical lack of hygiene, clothes sometimes being dirty because they picked them up, right off the floor from the day before. I thought it was interesting on the doubled up that questions like in your, which I hadn't considered, in your living environment, just knowing like who's making the rules or, what do you do when you want to watch a different channel on TV? Who's determining what channel everyone's going to watch? Who's determining when people are going to bed or what time you should get up or how quiet you should be in the morning? And those kind of things that we kind of take for granted if we're not in a doubled up situation. So it talked a lot about just a lot of uncertainty and uneasiness in the living environment and how that can carry over to the classroom. We often think as doubled up is okay because they have shelter and they have a roof over their head. But oftentimes those doubled up people, when they're struggling, students, when they're struggling, they don't share why they're struggling or that they're doubled up out of embarrassment or it said a lot of times people in situations, their parents are very, very stressed and are hiding things. And the kids know that. So maybe it's a landlord that they are running from or family members, that kind of thing. So it talked about that being really quiet out of fear of letting something out that parents have been hiding. So it had great suggestions on ways to support these kind of students. Support by asking, can you tell me how your family works so that you know, like, who's the one who's guiding them in homework, or is there anyone guiding them in homework? Do they have any rules and expectations at home? And then to help them in the classroom on how to handle things like rules, because it's at home, it's a free-for-all with 10 people there and no one's really in charge. So how do you go from that environment to a classroom environment where there's expectations and rules? One that I love was to help them work through steps to take to reach goals, because they haven't had that modeled for them. They haven't seen what that looks like before. That's oftentimes why they're in their situation they're in. So it talked about having mentors, having personal mentors with an educator so that there is order and calm and they have this sense of belonging and community. And then they have some that can guide them into how to reach their goal and teach them that. Oftentimes we just focus on teaching curriculum and content, but those students need teaching on the basic things that us who aren't doubled up and homeless just take for granted. So it was a great magazine, a lot of things to pull from that I hope to support our district in as we move forward in cultural proficiency. And it had great insight, and I hope to talk to kids more to get their perspective.